Welcome in, everyone, to the Auburn Postgame Show. The Birmingham Bowl just wrapping up. This one brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Matt Scalisi joins me now from Protective Stadium in downtown Birmingham. The final score of that one, Auburn falling to Houston 17-13, unable to get the job done against this Houston football team. They went up and took a lead there heading into the fourth quarter, and unfortunately, Houston came back and scored there in the fourth quarter, and they weren't able to get back in the end zone again to take the lead. And so, again, the final score 17-13. And Matt, first and foremost, obviously you're there at the stadium. You kind of watch things unfold. Just sort of your overall thoughts on what went right for Auburn and what went wrong for Auburn that ultimately eliminated their opportunity to win this Birmingham Bowl and to kind of put a bow on the 2021 season.
Well, unfortunately, not a lot of difference when it comes to offensive production over what we saw from that final 4-game stretch of the season where Auburn lost all 4 of those games, obviously really struggled offensively in all 4 of those. And I think, there are a few things you can point to as to why that happened. I think one of it is Bo Nix not being healthy anymore. I do think removed a very dangerous part of the Auburn offensive attack, which was Bo Nix's mobility. I think that TJ Finley has some positive skills, and we saw some of it on display today, and we could talk about that later in the show too. But TJ Finley's lack of a run threat, I think, really allows defenses to focus in, first of all, on the running backs. It's a big part of why Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter have not been more consistently productive. I think it's because there isn't an alternate run threat. There is not that option for the quarterback to keep and be a threat holding on to the ball. So I think that made an impact once Bo Nix was no longer a part of the offense. And then I think the other part of it is, we know from earlier on in the season, the receivers on this team, I think there are some good ones for sure. I think Kobe Hudson made some incredible plays today. He is a guy to keep an eye on for next season. But there are not enough of those guys, I don't think. I don't think there are enough elite playmakers around the quarterback position to mask not having an elite quarterback. And that's not me putting this loss on TJ Finley. That's me saying Auburn is in a situation here where I don't think they have an elite quarterback. Lots of teams have lots of success without having an elite quarterback, but it's usually because they have a lot of other good pieces on their offense. And I don't think Auburn has enough of those things to make up for the fact that they don't have an elite quarterback in this offense.
Yeah, and certainly just kind of looking at the scope of the game, there just was not any explosive firepower. There just never seemed to be a rhythm, the consistency. And, coming into this game, talking about the tempo, just kind of getting your thoughts on, Coach Hudson, obviously, having his hand at the play calling and being a big part of that. What were your thoughts overall with the play calling and how the tempo went and things sort of transpired for Auburn on that side of the football? And then we'll talk about the defense.
It's always hard to judge play calling, I think, right in the moment when it's happening, because it's hard to see the bigger picture of what they might be trying to do until after the game. My initial thoughts, having just watched it, are that I think there were a couple of spots where if I wanted to pick on play calling a little bit, I maybe would. And I think one of those moments was late in the game when Auburn has a lead, that they're up 13-10 late in this game. They really just need to get a few stops and somehow find a way to kill some clock. And, if you could put more points on the board, great, but you've got enough to win right there. And I think what I'm thinking of particularly is the drive really just before Houston came down the field and scored the winning touchdown. That drive included 2 deep balls by TJ Finley that were badly overthrown. I don't think that's very inconsistent with his play for most of the year. I just don't think he's got the touch for a pass like that. And it felt to me like the play call in those moments were, let's try to win the whole thing right here. Let's try to put a nail in the coffin and sort of seal this victory. And to me, that maybe feels like a little bit of impatience. It feels like getting away from the things that got you the lead in the game in the first place. They were finding ways, as a lot of our commenters are pointing out, to run the ball effectively. Sometimes they were having to do end arounds and sweeps. They were trying to throw the ball to the running backs in the flats, but those things were working, and they were finding ways to move the ball. And those are also great tools to have when you are trying to kill clock and get the game over with when you have a lead. And I think Brian Harsin got away from that late in this game, perhaps out of a desire to end it, to sort of go for the kill shot, I guess, if you want to put it that way. I think it's worth questioning those decisions. But in terms of the rest of it, I really don't think that this game was lost purely based on play calling. I think that this has been a team that for the last month of the season, extending into now, just has too many personnel problems to consistently be great on offense. You want to talk about the defense? This is a defensive performance that wins a lot of games. You hold the other team to 10 points for the vast majority of the ball game. You're going to win most of those games. But you have to get offensive support, and they weren't able to get it. And I think that's a consistent thing that we saw over the last 5 losses of the season for Auburn.
Yeah, definitely a consistent theme there. And I think that, is where the frustration comes in, because obviously as Coach Harsin comes in, he's known for his consistency. And I think that's what they hope to build behind that. And certainly not seeing a consistent Auburn football team. And I agree with you. I think a lot of it, you have to point to personnel. So certainly, kind of a difficult situation there. Now, kind of looking ahead to some of the signs of hope, some bright spots that we saw from this Auburn football team, just in your opinion. And I think, we can point to the defense on this one. The defensive effort, I think, really kept this Auburn football team in this one, much as they have for a good bit of this season. Just your thoughts overall, and what are some bright spots and things that positive takeaways from this matchup, from this game, as they close this chapter?
Well, look, like I mentioned, I do think a lot of things were going well with the running backs in this game. I thought they found some fun, interesting things to do with Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter that were a little bit outside of what we've seen for most of the season. This running, we knew coming into today that the offensive line was not in the best shape that it's been in all year. And logically, that would tell you lining up behind that line and trying to test the middle of the defense is probably not your best game plan to try and make yards with those particular ball carriers. And I thought they were really creative and did some interesting things to get Hunter and Bigsby the ball in space. And they were both very productive. I mean, I'm pulling up the stats right now to confirm this, but look, 96 yards on the ground out of Bigsby, another 68 through as a receiver in this game. So that's a great performance individually for a guy that we all know is an extremely talented skill position player in this offense. That's certainly a bright sign, and that's something that I think you go into the offseason and say, how do we build on this? How do we build our offense around this type of skill? I mean, he's obviously a guy with a lot of versatility. He can do a lot of different things for you. And again, I think we've seen good things from Hunter for throughout the season. But if I'm looking at another individual performance today, you look at Kobe Hudson, and we've been waiting for that wide receiver one to establish themselves all season. I think Kobe Hudson did it a couple of times during the year. It wasn't consistent game to game, but a great game to go out on today for him, that I think you have to look at in the offseason and say, again, is this maybe a guy that we start to build game plans around going forward? 57 yards, 4 catches, and a touchdown. The only touchdown that Auburn scored today in this game. So I think there are absolutely some strong returning pieces to this offense. It's a bummer to see some defensive guys that have been so productive and so strong for Auburn on that side of the ball, leaving and this being their final game, particularly Smoke Monday going out on a targeting call to end his college career. But at the same time, this is a defense that has recruited well for years, long before Hudson got there, and they're adding some more good pieces in this new recruiting class. So I think that there's plenty of reason to expect Auburn's defense to be good again next year. They have a well-built roster on that side of the ball. Lauren, I do want to bring up really quickly, a lot of folks are asking about Demetrius Davis.
Yep, I was actually just about to ask you that. We've had a lot of people inquiring.
Yeah, I mean, the backup quarterback, we did not see him at all today. There were some, certainly questions asked about him during the week. I know it's been a popular topic for Auburn fans over the last month or so. For whatever reason, Brian Hudson does not feel comfortable giving him the reins to this offense yet. It could be from things he's seeing in practice, from his command of the offense. But I tend to be of the opinion, like a lot of our commenters are, I think, that when you're in a situation like today, you truly do have nothing to lose. You're here in the Birmingham Bowl. The stakes are really not very high. And once you've sort of reached a point, around halftime of this game and nothing is working for your offense, could it really get that much worse to try something different to bring in a spark? But it just didn't seem like something Brian Hudson was comfortable doing. In general, I would say doesn't seem like he's a guy who likes taking big risks, who likes gimmicks and likes doing things that are way out of your comfort zone. So, maybe that's something he has to get more comfortable with the longer that he's at Auburn. But either way, I think that it's fair to say, whether it's Demetrius Davis or someone else, Auburn is going to need to have an open quarterback competition in the spring. And TJ Finley should be a part of that, but that job should not be guaranteed to anybody going into next season right now. There needs to be some pretty intense competition to win that job, I think.
Yeah. And I'm with you there. I think while, you kind of mentioned the Birmingham Bowl not having a significance to it necessarily, and you've got a lot of guys opting out, transfer portal is a real thing. Like there's a lot of things happening right now. But I do think that now you look at Auburn's record at 6-7 versus 7-6. And, while it's one game, one loss on that side of the losing column, I do think that it still holds precedent in the fact that you want to end this game. And to your point, Hudson maybe in that regard just did not have the comfort level to throw in another quarterback to give him the reps and to try to provide that spark, especially because things were kind of hanging in the balance and things were on the fence there. So I certainly, feel much the same as you do in regards to why he perhaps didn't go that direction and put Davis in the football game and try to give the offense some spark. And, unfortunately, I just think TJ Finley hasn't had an opportunity to develop and, just not a lot of consistency there, not a lot of confidence from him. And, where is he at sort of on the health spectrum?
Sure.
The ankle, what percentage is he at? From what I could tell, it seemed like there was a good bit of mobility there, but just in the ankle itself, but not knowing sort of what that looked like leading up to it, how much practice time was he able to get. I think there's a lot of variables that play into it, but certainly, a disappointing loss for this Auburn team, not the direction they wanted to go, falling to Houston there 17-13. And with that being said, as we wrap things up, Matt, just kind of reflecting on the season as a whole, I think there's a lot to be said about, again, the consistency. And, I think that's what the hope was, that you bring a coach in, you find that consistency. And, there was a lot of ups and downs. And especially here in this last quarter of the season, the backstretch of the season, there was absolutely no consistency. And I think there's a lot of disappointment there. And, it just makes you wonder, okay, why is a guy like Bo Nix transferring to Oregon? Why are they not keeping some of their prime players intact here? What's going on behind the scenes? But in your opinion, based on what you saw from this entire season, what are your biggest takeaways that, perhaps lead you, into maybe a positive spin into the 2022 season?
Well, Lauren, I'm trying to think back on similar circumstances maybe that I've covered in my career, where a coach's first season sort of takes this trajectory that we saw in 2021 for Auburn under Hudson. And it obviously didn't go that way with Gus Malzahn. He came in and was immediately successful, had an incredible run in his first season. I think you can point to, you can go back further to Gene Chiswick's first season at Auburn, where they certainly were not a great team, but actually did seem to be getting better over the course of that season and put a really tough challenge to Alabama in the Iron Bowl that year. Which, look, to be fair, Harsin's team did the same thing. They took Alabama to the wire, who is now the number one team in the college football playoffs. But clearly not the finish to the season that this team wanted. The only parallel that I've personally covered that is like this would be Nick Saban's first season at Alabama. And I know we're doing this for Auburn fans. I know y'all probably don't want to hear a comparison to Alabama, to Nick Saban, but hear me out here. I think sometimes what can be going on in a situation like this is, when a new coach comes in and wants to change a lot of things, particularly change the culture, there are going to be guys on the team that are excited about that and buy into it. And there are going to be guys who don't buy into it and don't really feel enthusiastic about the direction that the program is headed. And when you have a division like that, when you don't have everybody on the same page in the program, things are going to go off the rails. As soon as something goes wrong, as soon as anything is not fun anymore, you're going to have people turning on each other. You're going to have things falling apart. And I think that may be part of what is going on here. Now, the solution to that is that eventually the people who don't buy in and who don't want to be a part of this program in the direction that it's going move on. We've already seen some of that happening, obviously. The question is, once that happens, how long does it take Brian Harsin to sort of reach the point with his roster where there are both a bunch of guys that he wants to be there and that everybody else who is there wants to be a part of it, buys into what he is doing and what his philosophy is. If you can reach that point and everybody within the program is on the same page, from the players to the coaching staff to even folks in the administration level, if everybody is bought in and believes that things are going the right direction, that's when you have big success. And I don't think we're there yet with this program. That doesn't mean they can't get there. It means that more evolution is needed. It means that more people need to be brought in who want to be a part of it. And other people maybe need to be convinced that this is the right way to go. So that's the best parallel I've got for you. I think that it's pretty clear to me that not everybody is on the same page about how things are going. And not, I'm looking at our comments right now. Not everybody in the comments is on the same page about it. Some of you guys are really optimistic about next season. Some of you are in here saying, we got to get rid of Harsin. We got to bail after 1 year. I think there is division. There's not an agreement about what needs to be done in the direction that everything needs to go. And that's the biggest challenge for a coach like Harsin, is getting everybody on the same page. If he can do that, that's what leads you to having a successful tenure at the highest level in college football.
Well said, Matt. I think you outlined things there really well. And before I let you go, I do want to ask you just your thoughts on the new stadium. What were your thoughts halftime? Did you get a nice meal in?
We did. I will say this stadium is certainly on the smaller side from folks who are used to SEC stadiums. I mean, this is more on the level of something like Vanderbilt or Mississippi State back before Mississippi State expanded their stadium to what it looks like now. But in some ways that can be cool. It got really loud in here when things were going well for Auburn. The crowd was overwhelmingly Auburn fans, obviously, and pretty much every seat was full in this place. It was a hard sellout. I think this is obviously not the bowl game that Auburn fans want to find themselves in, but I think as a venue, this place has a lot to offer, and it is very cool when you have highly invested fan bases in the building here. I don't know what that means for the future, but I think it would be cool to see, perhaps some higher profile matchups here, regular season type things. I mean, we've seen this in other cities around the country. We've seen it in Charlotte and Atlanta, obviously, and Dallas have hosted these kind of season opening neutral site games. I'd love to see Birmingham try and make a bid for something like that, because having fans in this stadium who are excited to be here and are pumped up, this is a great atmosphere for something like that. And, Auburn fans are disappointed about this game, and they're out of the stadium now, but they're probably not all going to go straight home. There's a lot of stuff right around the stadium too, which is a big advantage of it. I mean, I'm looking at Top Golf over here. There's a whole bunch of cool restaurants right behind me on the other side. So this is a fun area just to make a whole day out of going to a college football game.
Love it. Thank you so much, Matt. He's Matt Scalisi joining us from Protective Stadium in downtown Birmingham. The final score there, Auburn falling to Houston 17-13. Of course, we want to thank all of you all for watching, and we want to thank our sponsors, Medical Properties Trust, for joining us and being our sponsor for our postseason coverage, including this of the Birmingham Bowl. Thank you all so much. We wish you well as you close out this chapter in 2021 and you look ahead to 2022. Farewell, my friends.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.